joining us tonight. And again, Tyler is the administrator at the library, so he's helping keep this unchaotic, I guess, and he'll help us with that. But it should run relatively smoothly with just a handful of people. So my name's Christian Reiber. I am an IAWP certified holistic wellness coach. And so I'm really offering this as just to sort of reach out to the community, because in many of the conversations I've had since the lockdown, people are talking about stress and boredom. So those two things really stand out as very, very common recently. So I thought it'd be a good idea to just kind of get on here and help people understand what it means and what to do about it and all of that good stuff. So to reiterate real quick, if you have a question, we should be able to simply speak and not have it too chaotic. If didn't hear you or whatever, you on the very bottom of your screen, you'll see a button for participants. If you click that button on the bottom of the sidebar that opens up, on the very bottom of that, you can click the words raise your hand. And so if you do that, then I'll see that maybe you have a question. You can also use the chat bar as well. So like I say, we should be able to handle it no problem with voice, and we'll go from there. So do you guys have a preference for what we talk about first? Would you prefer to speak about stress or boredom first? Do you guys have a preference? Not really? Okay.
Stress.
Well, stress, okay. Well, stress it is then. That's fine. And so I'm gonna have you guys keep just sort of a mental tally. I'm gonna ask you some questions and just try and kind of keep a mental tally of how many yeses you end up after these questions, okay? So, and you don't have to speak your answer or tell anyone else, but in the end, I'll tell you what the tallies mean, okay? So first question, are you eating when you aren't hungry? That's the first one. Secondly, do you feel mild to severe anxiety or depression? Third, is your energy level down in the dumps? Fourth, do you feel unhappy with your life, your career, your relationships, your purpose, or your path? 5, has your sleep pattern been disrupted? And lastly, have you noticed there are more conflicts, confrontations, and or more frequent self-destructive behavior since the lockdown? Okay. So these 6 that I just asked about are all more clear and obvious symptoms of anxiety and stress. So out of the 7 questions, or I guess it's 6, if you tallied more than 1, it likely means you're stressed. And so I think it's kind of easy to get to 1 and past that with those questions, because you know this is unprecedented. Our ancestors lived through the Spanish flu, but we don't have any real direct sense of what that meant or how it affected people. So it's difficult to frame our connection to that. So the unseen symptoms of stress are actually worse than these 6 that we talked about. So that can mean increased stress hormone release of cortisol and other stress hormones, reduced immunity and onset of autoimmune disorders, slow digestion, and the worst, high blood pressure, which is known as the silent killer. So stress causes directly all of those very difficult to notice symptoms, along with the more obvious ones that we already talked about. Okay, so stress is not healthy. It's actually one of the worst things that can happen to us because it's prolonged and somewhat constant in this type of environment. So some people live a high stress life because of their job, because of, I don't know, they might be surrounded with negative people or whatever. There's a lot of things that can lead to ongoing continuous stress. And so through our history, stress wasn't a bad thing. You know, if there's a bear chasing you, stress works great. It gets your fight or flight mode kicked in, and hopefully you get away from the bear. But that real stress is fine, and it's normal for the body, and it's occasional, and it's infrequent, so it doesn't cause these insidious health concerns right along with it. And so the imagined stress of or even non-critical stress, like a high intensity job or a difficulty with a relationship, you know, that type of thing, unfortunately kicks in that fight or flight mode, and it's so constant and so frequent that it can become very overwhelming, and then obviously cause these health concerns. So does anybody have any questions about just the basics of stress and what it means to health? It's pretty straightforward stuff. It's kind of scary, but luckily we have some solutions that can be very effective. So the first thing that I like to talk about when it comes to stress and sort of getting rid of it, or at least minimizing it, is to add comfort to your life. So what does that mean? It can mean a lot of, there you go, essential oils, that could certainly help. So like essential oils, we have lots of natural solutions at our fingertips. Many of them are free. And so I'm going to sort of skip ahead to natural solutions, and we'll get back to getting more comfort in our lives here in a second. So natural solutions, just some ideas to sort of throw out there. First, more time in nature. Being outdoors among plants and trees has been proven to lower stress. And so more laughter. There's YouTube videos until the end of days to go and look for something to make you laugh. And it's every different kind of humor. So it's easy to find something that can get your mind off this craziness and kind of back to you, back to what you're used to, back to how you're supposed to be feeling. So beyond that, practicing yoga, which is another thing that can be free. There are zillions of yoga experts out there that put their videos on YouTube for free, and you can go to YouTube and just search beginner yoga for people who hate yoga or whatever. And it's just a great way to start, and it's easy. There's nobody there to judge you. There's no one saying, wow, you're really not getting into that stretch. Like, that adds stress for a lot of people when they have a kind of a coach like that. So beyond that, hugs. We all can benefit greatly from just seeing people we know and hugging them. Is that sensible for right now? Maybe not. If they live in your house, of course, If not, it's probably wise to stay away from that. But on more general terms, simply because of the chemical reaction that happens when hugs happen, we know that it can be a great way to alleviate stress.
And pets.
Learning, I'm sorry?
And pets.
Yes, yes, that's exactly right. So spending time with a loved animal, a pet, you know, that can definitely, and has been shown to definitely help. Breathing exercises, meditation, and mindfulness are a few more free ways to kind of get control, come back to yourself, get grounded, and get your mind off the craziness. One that a lot of people don't think about because of the way society sort of tells us that we have to say yes to everything is simply saying no. You know, if you are asked to do something that doesn't serve you and causes stress, you're allowed to say no. And so society might tab that as somewhat taboo, and say that saying no to anyone means you're just being selfish and hateful or whatever. And that's really not true, because if we are able to say no and we're able to, you know, have some me time, or, you know, use one of these other comfort activities in our lives, then we have way more energy, and way more to give. And we can, you know, say yes to things that serve us and serve the other person. So if it's a one-sided thing, and you feel like, wow, this person's really just sort of using my time and I'm getting nothing back, maybe that's something that you could say no to. So aromatherapy, she raised a couple bottles of essential oils. That's a great way to manage stress. Limiting screen time can really help. Unfortunately, too much screen time, especially at the wrong time in the day, can knock circadian rhythms off and cause problems with sleep. And guess what? When your sleep is disrupted, it causes stress, which causes more of a disruption in sleep, which causes more stress. You get the point. It is a sort of a cycle that is kind of scary, and can really get very, very bad for some people.
Christian.
So, I'm sorry?
Christian, go back and explain when you talked about watching too much TV or screen time, I think you called it.
Yeah.
And it disturbed something, but I didn't catch what you said.
Oh, sure. So, too much screen time at night, in other words, past 8 or 9 p.m., sort of triggers the circadian rhythms in our bodies to go out of whack. And so circadian rhythms keep sleep cycles in order. I could do an entire Zoom on circadian rhythms because it's a very...
What are they? I don't know what they are.
It's sort of difficult to explain without taking a half hour.
Yeah.
But the key for setting them right is light in the morning and darkness at night. So getting out in the sun at sunrise is one of the most amazing things you can do for your body. It's not talked about on the news or in TV shows or the movies or anything like that. It's a sort of hidden gem that a lot of people don't know about. So that helps set the circadian rhythms. Then when you get away from, especially blue light at night, your body is then sort of setting itself up for sleep mode. And when you get to the time you want to go to sleep, you can simply go to sleep. It doesn't have to be a struggle. It doesn't have to be this ultra difficult thing where you're tossing and turning all night. So anyone that has difficulty sleeping, that's the first thing I talk to them about is, okay, well, what times during the day do you have lights going in your photoreceptors, your eyes? So that can be really critical and make a huge difference. Another way to reduce or manage stress is by eliminating clutter. And so nowadays, I'm trying to think of her name, Marie Kondo. Yeah, a lot of people have heard about Marie Kondo, and she has her system. I think it's like, first you go through the clothes and then the books and then papers and on. But her premise is, okay, does this thing in your hands bring you joy? And if not, thank it for providing whatever it provided while you had it in your possession, and then move it along. So clutter is proven to be a stressful thing for just about everybody. And it can also be, of course, stressful starting the progress of getting rid of clutter, because it can seem super overwhelming and that type of thing. So I don't know that doing that can be helpful in these times for everyone, but it might be very helpful for some. So it's certainly something to consider. Beyond that, there are calming herbs that are very affordable and easy to find. Kava root, lemon balm, passion, valerian, lavender, chamomile. And so those are all natural, safe solutions to high stress. So they work great right before bed. And with some consistency, you can sort of get your body in, hey, it's bedtime. The tea can help you sort of get in sleep mode as you're preparing to go to bed. So I always encourage people to, when possible, and when it comes to my clients, I always offer to work directly with their doctors to come up with solutions, but we're certainly looking to avoid man-made solutions like pharmaceuticals, which many of them have been proven to make mood disorders worse. And so these chemicals do not react great with the body. The body thinks that they're a foreign substance, and they just don't do what we hope they should. So sometimes it's a necessity, and that's fine. I'm not saying we want to avoid these things to our own detriment, but typically there's a better route than something that's man-made. Okay. So those are some natural solutions that, just looking through the list, the vast majority of those things are free. Okay. Several of them are also what I consider comfort activities. Okay. So as a society, when we need comfort, how many times do we turn to comfort food? It's sort of like it's been a reward for us our whole lives. And so it becomes ingrained as the thing to do when we need comfort. We turn to comfort food. Unfortunately, most comfort food is also not healthy. So it can be, multiplication, where it's like you're getting the bad food and you're not getting the comfort you actually are seeking when you're eating the food. A lot of people, when they turn to comfort food, they wolf it down and then beat themselves up for doing it. So they gained no comfort, they gained no satisfaction from actually eating the food. It's a food they choose because it's delicious, but I didn't taste any of it because I hurried up and ate it so fast just so I could get to the end and be like, what did I just do? So it's, it's kind of a rough cycle to be caught in, is having that, and in certain cases, like Thanksgiving or whatever, comfort food is fantastic. Enjoy it, feel the love of it, and get as much as you possibly can out of it. I always ask people how much they chew their food, and that's an indication of how quickly they're rushing through it or taking their time and getting that enjoyment, getting that satiation, getting that savory awesomeness out of it. There's a ton of great things in comfort food. So if we choose to eat it, we hurry up through it, we have done nothing for ourselves. So if you pick up a cookie and you decide to eat it, slow down, enjoy the heck out of it, and get what you went there for. You went for comfort, get that comfort. Okay. So on the other side, we have comfort activities that aren't necessarily a habit yet. So rather than turning to comfort food, we can simply stop and breathe. Stopping and taking 5 deep breaths when we feel stress is another awesome proven way to really just get centered, get grounded, come back to the self, feel the stress sort of leak away. And does it work every time? No, but it's a great tool. Like a lot of tools, it isn't for every job, but it can be awesome in many cases. Beyond that, listening to favorite music, stretching, moving your body, whether it's, quote unquote exercise or just walking, it really doesn't matter. When your body moves, it's typically stress relieving. So outside of that, connecting with friends or family. Right now, as this lockdown has sort of locked us in our houses, doing this type of thing with friends, calling them, texting them, checking in, hey, you're the strongest person I know, but is everything okay? It's as if society teaches us we don't need to check in with individuals who appear strong, but guess what? We never know what's going on inside people's heads. So it's really not a bad idea to just sort of check in and tell them you love them, and that alone can not only reduce your stress, it can reduce their stress as well. So that's another multiplication in the other direction. Feel and recognize your emotions. Now that's taboo. If anything's taboo, that is. You're not allowed to feel emotions. You're not allowed to recognize them. You're not allowed to say they're okay. Unfortunately, society has sort of pinned us in a corner saying that emotions are bad. And that's ridiculous. Because what we know about psychology is that dismissing emotions and hurrying up to get them out of our way means they're going to come back as something more intense the next time this thing that has happened happens. So it's way better to feel the emotion, let it run its course, recognize it for what it is, understand why it's there, and then say thank you and goodbye, and it's gone. So when we say thank you and goodbye too early in the process, it's coming back. We can pretty much guarantee that. And when it comes back, it will be more intense. It will be uglier, whatever. When we feel it, recognize it, understand it, then it plays its role and does its job, which is good. And so society teaches us a lot of taboos, and a lot of them are just so unhealthy. So that's kind of a touchy subject. A lot of us are taught rather harshly that emotions are not okay to express, they're not okay to feel, they're not okay to do anything with, but get rid of. So moving on, seeing the big picture is a comfort activity. You know, understanding why you do what you do. You know, as far as this lockdown goes, we're staying in our house. In my case, I'm staying in my house because I know elderly people and I know they're at risk. So I also know that it takes 2 weeks sometimes to even get any symptoms from this thing. So it's wise to connect with why you're doing it. Just focusing on the fact that it kind of sucks that you can't go out and be with friends or you know, do the things you want to do, that leads to more stress. But when you look at really why you're doing it and reframing, you know, the reasons, it can offer some stress relief by looking at that big picture and having some understanding around it. So just more on the mindfulness end of things with that. So then a couple more super easy and free activities: take a bath, take a nap, take a shower, take a drive in the country, you know, go on an adventure, a hike, whatever. All of those things can give you a bunch of comfort, and they're not self-destructive. Okay. So the third thing that relates to stress is being aware of what you do and do not have control over, and try to leave stress related to things you don't have control over behind. And so when it comes to this particular lockdown, what we don't have control over is what other people do. So I've talked to a lot of people, and they've really, you know, kind of gotten wound up and ultra frustrated with the fact that they're relying on other people's common sense. Okay, so doing that is really just very, very stressful. We have no control over what other people do, but what we can certainly do is control our reaction to these things that we don't have control over. We can always control our reaction. We can always take our focus back to what we're able to control. We're able to control how many times we wash our hands in a day. We're able to control how close we get to other people. We're able to control how often we're around other people. So focusing on what we can control not only takes the focus off these things we can't control, but allows us to you know, be mindful of what we can, and then make those choices and benefit from them. So avoiding negative people, places, and limiting exposure to mainstream news is what I recommend when it's not a pandemic. So when it is a pandemic, I think, you know, putting too much focus on what could be false news in some cases, you know, we unfortunately are stuck in a system where sometimes the media isn't telling us the truth. So, you know, we can get false information causing stress, and then that leads to, oh, I got to check another area to verify it or whatever, and it just can become a constant stress by checking in. So if it comes down to it, check in a couple times a day rather than spending an hour or two in front of the news. But again, I'm not a huge fan of the news in general. there are way better ways to get information than a network news source that is telling you what money has dictated is going to be told to you. You know, it's disturbing but true, and that's kind of what we're stuck with. So by avoiding that stuff, it can make a big difference there too. So that is most of what I have on stress, but I'd certainly like to hear from you guys if there's something you get faced with that either causes stress or makes you feel like you can't get rid of it or whatever, and maybe I can offer a different perspective. And oh yeah, hang on, Mel, you're muted.
Oh,
There
am
you
I?
go. Yep, there you go. Go ahead.
Oh, did you mute me?
I don't think so. I'm not sure how that happened.
I wouldn't blame you. I liked what you said when we were talking about the stress and finding ways to come out of it by what we choose, that we come back to self, because that's where we're grounded. That's what really matters, is if we feel grounded. It's these other things that are taking us away from that grounded feeling of self. And
Yeah.
I don't know why I need that reminder so often. There's just so many other things that self gets involved in those instead of staying where it should be, I guess.
Yep.
I like that.
Yeah, great. And so, you know, what has society taught us about the self? It's like we almost have to ignore the self so that we can take care and fix everyone else's problems and do all of that. And all of us know how intensely stressful that can be, to stand in the position where you're trying to fix everyone's problems. That is horrific and super difficult, ultra tiring and exhausting and all of that. So yeah, when we take care of ourselves, when we allow some me time and even schedule it, I really encourage people to schedule me time. We are all important and other people are important. You know, so obviously we don't just dismiss everyone and their needs, but spending time that is specifically set aside for ourselves is very, very therapeutic. Any other thoughts on stress?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I was just thinking about this yesterday actually, but I almost think for me, it feels like a mourning process because everything has changed so quickly.
Yeah.
And you can't wrap your head around it because you don't have a reference for anything that's going on. So,
Exactly.
So I'm binge watching Hallmark. I have to have a happy place.
There you go.
I need a happy ever after somewhere.
Yeah, a little bit of distraction, you know,
Yeah.
and that's great. So that's Tam's time, you know, that's
Yeah.
good for
Yeah.
you, you know. It's like we can all pick a part of our day to set aside and say, you know what, this time's for me. And doing so, I'm going to talk about subconscious thought here for a second. It's a little arbitrary, but when we do that, our subconscious self feels warm and fuzzy. I don't know how else to put it. It's just when you literally put it on the calendar that at 10 o'clock Friday, I am going to do my favorite thing, whatever it is. I'm going to go, for me, I go for a bike ride. For others, it's whatever, spend some time filing nails. Everybody loves what they love, but making sure that they actually get that time and have it set aside and have it be non-negotiable. Isn't that strange? Something for the self that is non-negotiable. I mean, clearly, if someone calls you and you have to go pick them up because there's no ambulances, that's negotiable, right? Then it's like, okay, yeah, I can set aside this thing that is serving me and come help you. So I'm not saying that it becomes this, permanent and absolute thing. There are exceptions to every rule, but that way, if we are setting aside time on a regular basis, we're going to get it on a regular basis. It's very uncommon to have someone call you up and tell you that they need something critically and right now. So, that self-care is really important. It's also difficult for a lot of people. It just sort of takes practice to get used to it and to come to terms with the fact that it's okay. Society says it's not, but you know what? Society doesn't know everything. And conventional wisdom has been proven wrong so many times that we can almost say it isn't really all that wise in the first place. So that's stress. Did anybody else have anything on stress? And we'll move on to boredom. Okay. So in looking at boredom, I researched several people who study these things and kind of came up with a synopsis on my own of their thoughts. And so the first thing that really stood out to me was the fact that boredom is neither bad nor good. It's our choices about how to counter it that make it either bad or good. It's our choice in the moment when boredom hits that will determine if that boredom is bad or good. Okay, so it's really a signal. Boredom is sort of a signal that we're not meaningfully engaged with our world, or not having enough activities that are both meaningful and challenging. So thinking about the reasons or the big picture why we're doing this activity that causes boredom can change how we feel about it. So I was talking with you guys about stress and how just sort of checking in with yourself and asking the question, okay, well, why am I doing this thing that causes boredom? In the lockdown case, it's so that we're not exposing others to what we might be carrying, and we're not exposing ourselves to what others might be carrying. That's a really good reason to be kind of stuck in the house, but we can, make it a negative or a positive. Thinking about it and asking ourselves questions about it is the best way to put it in perspective, and hopefully it might lessen the feeling of boredom. So here's a couple strategies to get rid of it when it shows up. Creating a new routine can restore a sense of meaning to daily life. So using back to that calendar, and not only do the things that we need to have happen in the day go on the calendar, but also that me time, that I get this hour, or I get this 10 minutes, or I get this whatever block of time is reasonable and fits your day. I get that among this list of things that has to be done. So putting it on the calendar, connecting with it, and kind of giving a meaning to the day can really help curb the boredom with that. So then trying new things like recipes, workouts, that type of thing through learning, learning what we have the capacity to understand. Like I'm not going to start trying to learn calculus. That's not going to kill my boredom. It's going to make me more bored and maybe angry. But that can curb boredom not only for the now, but if we're learning something new, it can curb boredom in the future, in the long run. It can revisit and kill boredom off on some other instance. So when we need a break from this meaningful stuff we're trying to incorporate, guilty pleasures are okay. If we need to sit in front of the TV and just not think for an hour or whatever, great, so be it. We're not hurting anybody, we're not hurting ourselves, maybe, but at least it's a way to, and there are many other guilty pleasures besides just watching TV, but it allows us that time to take a break from having to have everything mean so much. And so we're searching for that meaning to get rid of the boredom, but it can also get somewhat tedious if we're only focused on these ultra meaningful and profound ways to live our lives. That can just get somewhat exhausting. So I'll go back to my point from before. When you do that, get as much enjoyment out of it as you can, and then, you know, return to more meaningful pursuits when you have the energy. So here are several types of boredom, and you guys, you don't have to react, but I'm just going to ask some questions here to give you a sense of, okay, well, what type of boredom am I feeling when it hits? Okay, so does it feel like restlessness and aggression? That's called reactive boredom. Is it more helpless and depressive sort of state of being? That's apathetic boredom. Are you feeling withdrawn from the world but perfectly relaxed? That's indifferent boredom. Are you prone to wandering thoughts? That's called calibrating boredom. Or are you actively looking for something else to do, which is called searching boredom? So those are all the different ways that we can sort of feel it. And, you know, when we're done here, you can reflect on what that means to you and what you found yourself doing when boredom hits. You know, what's the feeling inside? How are you relating to it? You know, with, as an example, with the helpless and depressive state, that can turn to anger. And so, you know, there are many ways that this can manifest itself. Actively looking for something else to do, you know, like I said before, that can become exhausting if that's all you're doing. So I think this description and these different ways that boredom can come kind of outlines the first statement I made, that boredom isn't bad or good necessarily. It is based on how we react to it to determine whether it is actually good or bad. So one of the guys that, this gentleman Dormeau, who studies this stuff and writes books about it or whatever, he said, when you experience boredom that's neutral or positive in nature, the chance this might lead to creative ideas is much higher. And so when we talk about boredom, it's often painted in a negative light. And we think that boredom can't give us anything. But when us humans are studied in a bored state, it's shown that boredom can increase creativity. And I've never been that great of an artist, really. So I can't really relate with having a lot of creativity. I have been creative in my life, but I'm not an artist per se. I don't think. But, you know, for someone who has never connected with the artistic side of their nature, this can be a way to do that. And so in the moment when you feel bored, you can ask yourself, you know, do you feel stuck? Or do you sort of have a feeling like there's an unexpected change to creativity or to thoughtfulness or, you know, something like that. And so it's no wonder that we're often averse to downtime when you look at the pressure we're under to have visibly successful, interesting, and busy lives. You know, society says if you're not busy, you're not productive, you're not doing the right thing. Okay. And so this is just another misnomer that society pushes on us. And we treat boredom as a sort of personal failure and a waste of time rather than an important part of it. We feel like guilty about boredom and try to hide it with, you know, hey, I'm busy. How are you today? I'm busy. Oh, okay, that's good. Is that good? Like, you know, and I don't confront people on the street with that. I don't, you know, slam it back in their face, but it is something to consider that a lot of times when I ask someone how they are, that's the answer. I'm busy. And so that, you know, that can be, you know, that can just sort of feed into the boredom and certainly not helping. So, you know, back to society, it's telling us that physical work and practical results are the measure of one's worth. And it's simply not true. There's so much more that goes into who we are, how we benefit others, what we give, you know, how we support and all of that. There's a ton that goes into that. And so clearly it's not just the physical work and practical results that are key here. And so that idea itself is sort of at fault for our resistance to boredom. So we can't control creativity. That's why there's such a thing as writer's block, etc. So sometimes boredom will lead to great ideas, great creativity, a change in how you, you know, are satisfied with your life, and sometimes it won't. So we can't necessarily say, hey, here we go, I'm going to be bored and see how it, you know, helps with my creativity. But we can at least allow ourselves to have these boring moments. And when we sort of let go and accept the situation and allow ourselves a little bit of time, then change in creativity can start to manifest itself. So to me, it's back to that opening statement. You know, boredom can be good, it can be bad. We don't know going into it, but when we look at the boredom, we address it, we think about it, and we make choices, then it, you know, if it increases creativity and all of a sudden we're doing some fun stuff we've never done before, that's good. You know, if it's sort of depressing and we become angry, that's when we can label it bad. But these, you know, as a standalone emotion, boredom doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. So what, sure. Did you say that you had a question?
No, I said that's refreshing.
Oh, great, yeah. I guess it's just another perspective, and I had my own thoughts about boredom before I read this Dormo stuff, and his perspective on it really gave me a different light on it and helped me kind of understand the polarity that's there. You know, it doesn't have to be this ultra negative thing that we're trying to chase away. You know, some self-reflection, creativity, me time, all those are great things, and they might be manifested out of the boredom. So we don't have to officially classify every moment of boredom as this horrific thing that we need to chase away, or else we're in trouble. You know, it doesn't always have to be that. So that is boredom. I'm certainly curious if you guys have questions, or if you have an experience with boredom recently that you would like a perspective on, or whatever. I'm very interested to hear what you might have to say about this.
Well, Christian, being shut in all the time can definitely lead to a lot of me time. You know, so I'm getting plenty of me time because that's all there is. But and I've gotten into a routine where the dogs will wake me up when the dawn is coming up, when the sun's coming up. So I'm getting out, taking them for longer walks now, trying to get more exercise and have them get more exercise and stay out of the house as much as I can, because I'm finding that being inside the box, you know, I just have to keep pressing to get outside the box to be more of a, you know, to be more comfortable with the situation that's going on now, you know?
Yeah, I do. I get it. And so I guess maybe a perspective on your feeling about the inside of the house. Maybe think of ways that you can have an enjoyable experience in the house, maybe with the dogs or whatever, but brainstorm a little bit and maybe come up with some ideas to have activities inside the house that are positive, so that you're not necessarily having this negativity tied to the house. Rather, the negativity could be just, it's not the house that's causing the problem.
No, it's not the house.
You know, it's a spoofy situation.
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe think about ways that your perspective could change on that by adding in some enjoyable experiences inside the house, you know, or something like that. You know, we're in a time where we can't host parties, we can't bring people over for tea, we can't do those things. So, you know, solitary, enjoyable things are really our only recourse. So, you know, if you start brainstorming through that and you would like my perspective, you can simply call me, you know, and we'll chat about that. But I think that might help kind of take some of the negativity away from the house. It's not the house's fault yet, but you know, that could be something that might help with that part of it. Did anybody else have any, or did you have another question, Mom?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that is stress and boredom. If you guys want, you're welcome to, I have everyone's email. I think, do I have your email, Tam? Do you get my newsletter?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I can give it to you. I mean,
sure. So if you like, you can put your email in the chat. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send all of you an outline of the stuff we've been talking about today, so that you don't have to remember any of this stuff. You'll have it right there at your fingertips to refer to, and for ideas and that kind of stuff. I'm going to include with it a list of comfort activities that many of you may already have in your hands, but it's you know, just a reference for like, I'm bored, what can I do that won't hurt me in some way? You know, and you can turn to that list and get a couple ideas, like spending time with the dogs or whatever. And then as as time goes on, I do a monthly newsletter, and I'll send you that stuff too. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts?
I'm experiencing headaches quite a bit now that I'm in the house so much. Where is that coming from? Is that a stress thing or confinement thing, or it's just headaches? I can't explain it.
Whenever I hear the word headache, the first thing I think of is hydration. And so a lot of the people that I've worked
near the water, I know.
Yeah, that's the most likely culprit is dehydration, because what happens is, since our brain is a huge percent water, when we're dehydrated, the brain actually swells, and it doesn't swell much, but that tiny little bit of swelling pushes against the inside of the skull.
That's what it feels like too. Like,
yeah. So when I first start with my clients, I always ask them to give me an estimate for how much water they think they drink in a day. And the estimate is always, in every instance I've ever asked this question, everyone always overestimates the amount that they drink. When they start to keep track, they find out, oh my goodness, I am nowhere near what I thought. You know, and the reasoning is, a lot of times it's like, well, I'm in the bathroom peeing half my day. How could I possibly drink more water? And so what happens with hydration is, when you first start to drink more water, you will inevitably pee more. So be it. Fight your way through that. Eventually, you'll get to more homeostasis, and you'll simply be peeing more when you pee, rather than having to pee 10 times more than you did in the past.
So the frequency will be decreased after a while, correct? Is that what you're saying? The frequency?
Exactly. So then you just go back to your normal number of pees per day, but you're just peeing more. And the best indication of hydration is, it's kind of gross, but it's the color of your pee. If it's not clear, you're almost certainly dehydrated. There's some crappy vitamins out there that can make your pee look crazy colors, but it's still a great indicator of where you are with your hydration. So as you build up your hydration, I encourage you to take your time with it and do it incrementally. You know, maybe add, first keep track of how much you're drinking, and then to that average number of glasses per day, or however you're keeping track, add 1 glass to it for the first week. Every day you're adding 1 more glass to the amount you normally drink. And then the next, add another glass. So that's a quart. 2 days or 2 weeks in, that's a quart more than you normally drink. 3 weeks, it's 3 pints. 4 weeks, it's a half a gallon. So as you build up to the levels that the body is looking for, then it can be more sustainable, and you just feel way better. Skin improves, mentality improves. Headaches, of course, are a big indicator of dehydration. And then consider too that throughout our history, our ancestors ate food that had a lot of water in it. We eat food that is primarily dry. And so the feeling that we categorize as hunger isn't real hunger. None of us are starving, so none of us ever feel real hunger. That feeling of, hey, I got to eat something, that's dehydration every time. So what we typically do is, okay, here I feel this hunger thing, and I don't answer it with getting more hydrated. I answer it with dry food. Where does that leave my hydration? Further behind than when I started. So then the other feeling is thirst. By the time thirst comes, we're already dehydrated. So individuals who only drink water when they're thirsty are perpetually dehydrated. And so unfortunately, that's just the language our bodies use. There's a few times during the day that dehydration can send a message. 2, 3 in the afternoon. How many of you guys are like, oh God, I'm so tired? That is almost, yeah, it's almost always dehydration. You're right, and so how you answer that communication can be critical. So whatever, I kind of got off the subject here with hydration, but for me, hydration is key in so many of these health challenges, because we're not recognizing the message from our body and we're answering the message with the wrong thing. Please, please, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, if you feel frustrated. I have an ongoing free 45-minute stress coaching session offer out there. So all you have to do is reach out to me to schedule a time, and a coaching session is kind of like the opposite of how this went. It's me asking questions rather than me sort of shooting my mouth off the whole time. So I don't work like Curly Lambeau or some hard-nosed football coach. That's not how I roll. So if you guys, or if you know someone who's struggling with this and they're really stressed out and struggling with boredom, etc., please feel free to have them reach out, and I'll be happy to spend some time and offer perspective and that type of stuff. Okay. So thank you guys so much for coming, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need clarification on any of the stuff we talked about, anything like that. I'm very easy to track down.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Have a great night, everybody, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Love you. Bye.